Official news just broke. Christian Darrisaw is going to be out for the year with his knee injury. Quick bonus episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. Not a great, fun one today, coming off of a very frustrating loss to the Los Angeles Rams. Broke that one down in a lot of detail, talked about all the controversies and stuff in yesterday's full episode. But on Friday morning, the Vikings got the news that Christian Darrisaw will need season-ending knee surgery. I don't know what kind of knee surgery that is, whether it's meniscus or ACL, could affect the recovery timeline. But considering that it's October, and unless it's something like the Hockenson injury where there's like multiple things damaged or you need to wait for a long time to get surgery, as long as he can get it quickly, he should be in pretty good shape for the 2025 season, but he'll be out for the rest of this one. So that brings up a whole bunch of things. One, what do the Vikings do? And two, how does that impact their offense as a whole? And then also just, I think it's worth reflecting on the extension that the Vikings got done with Christian Darrisaw and kind of the impact that that has on like the context here. But first, I mean, the first question is, okay, what happens now at tackle? David Quessenberry goes in for the rest of the Rams game. That was their plan in the middle of the game, but sometimes your plan in the middle of the game and your plan long-term will be a little bit different. Now that they have a little bit of a mini bye to prepare, do they kick Blake Brandel back out to left tackle? And would they rather have him in than Quessenberry and then maybe Dalton Reisner in at left guard, even though that's not the position those two guys have been playing, which kind of gives me pause about it, but it's an idea? Or did they just say, okay, Quessenberry, you're our starting left tackle now for the rest of the season? There's also, of course, the idea of, doing something at the trade deadline. It's difficult for me to imagine that. Like I've been saying about the trade deadline for a couple weeks now, if you're going to make that move, which probably costs you your first round pick next year, if you're going to do that, it's not going to be a rental. So if you do that for a tackle and he starts for 8 games, and then he's just nothing to you anymore, like that's not an adequate use of a first-round pick. First-round pick gives you team control of a player for 4 years, not 8 games. So it would have to be some kind of crazy swaps, or maybe they make, they trade the first, but they get a second, a third, and a fourth, and a player back or something like that, and then you're like feeling a little bit differently about that. And we'd have to go through all the value, but I don't know if trade deadline is the move either. And I don't really like the Quessenberry move. Here's the, I think he's fine, but it would require you to adjust your offense in a way I'll describe soon. But here's the brutal reality is that there isn't a good answer for losing a superstar. You don't just replace that. You're just not going to get that. The Vikings are just worse now. That's how it goes. And it sucks because injuries have this very whiplash nature about them, I mean, when we as Vikings fans experience something bad, like our team losing, it is gradual. It goes from a game that's 0-0 to a game that's 0-7 to a game, it goes from a game that's tied to maybe we're down 1 score, maybe we're down 2 scores, and little kind of paper cuts of getting a good play made against you or whatever bring you from we can win this to maybe we won't to we really shouldn't to okay, now we can't and now it's 0-0. Or even like a season, like if the Vikings have a season collapse like 2016 or 2003, which is what everybody feels like right now. Caution you, chill out, long way to go. But if that happens, it happens gradually, right? It goes from 5-0 to 5-1, 5-2 to 5-3 to 5-4. Happens gradually. With Darrisaw, it goes from a guy playing, honest to God, maybe the best left tackle in the league right now. Like I would be willing to try to defend that statement or at least compare him to other names and see what I think. What he did against the Lions was astounding. It was one of the best games I've ever seen a left tackle play. I'm not kidding. It's unbelievable against, a very broken edge room without Aiden Hutchinson over there. But still, it's better than I've seen anybody else do against that group. And to go from on top of the world like that in an instant to he's gone. And now it's a weakness. Now it's a liability. Boy, does that just punch you in the gut. I mentioned it on yesterday's show, but it bears repeating. If you think that the Vikings shouldn't have run the ball at the end of the half because they would be too worried about injuries, you're not cut out to be a follower of football. That's just not how anybody handles that situation ever. You're asking for something totally unreasonable in hindsight. Try to think about how you felt before the thing happened rather than after the thing happened, right? That's hindsight bias. But here's what happened. Here's what we talk about next, right? What happens to the offense now? Because whatever they do, the left side of the offensive line is just going to be significantly worse. You're either going to have players moving over to positions that, at least Brandel and Reisner are familiar with it, but they haven't been practicing there all year, even in camp. Or you have somebody like David Quessenberry, who is a sensible backup, but as a starter for, that many games, you don't really feel as good about it. David Quessenberry, we've loved him as a guy that goes in because someone twisted their ankle and needs to get taped up. You got to hold down the fort for 4 plays. This is a different quality of player, right? So either way, whatever you do, it's going to be worse. Even if you go to the trade deadline, guess what? You're not getting somebody as good as Christian Darrisaw. Those people are not on the trade. Those people might not exist. I don't know if there is anybody as good as Christian Darrisaw. Call me a homer if you want, but I love that dude. So whatever it is, left side of the line is worse. So what do we do now? Well, this might encourage the Vikings to do something that I've been kind of advocating for them to do with their offense for a while as sort of a response to consternation about Ed Ingram on the other side. And that might change things a lot. That'll be next. Today's bonus episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast is brought to you by Zbiotics. Pre-alcohol probiotic drink by Zbiotics is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking, and here's how it works. When you drink alcohol, it gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Zbiotics your first drink of the night, drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more and get 15% off of your first order when you use LockedOnNFL at checkout. Zbiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL at checkout for 15% off. This episode is also brought to you by PrizePicks, the best way to play daily fantasy football. PrizePicks is easy. You just pick 2 to 6 players to put in your lineup. You're not putting together an entire team like some more traditional daily fantasy, and whether they'll do better or worse than their PrizePicks projection. It is just you versus the house, not you versus a massive pool of players. So if you, for example, thought that last night Justin Jefferson would get more than 83.5 yards, you could put him in your lineup, and if you get them all right, you can get up to 100 times your money. PrizePicks has been an absolute blast for me. I've been hitting it really hard. I think I had like 5 different lineups last night, and I did really good on them, so get in on this with me. Go to PrizePicks, go download the PrizePicks app, and use code LockedOnNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Once again, that's code LockedOnNFL at the PrizePicks app or at PrizePicks.com to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Moving on here with this quick bonus episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast. I want to talk about the offense. The other thing a lot of people are noticing right now is that Dallas Turner only got 3 snaps last night, and people are really mad about that again. If you want to know more about what's going on with Dallas Turner, check out patreon.com/LukeBrownNFL. We can actually watch those snaps and see, is he playing bad, or is it just kind of, dirty work? Like, what's he doing? So go to patreon.com/LukeBrownNFL. Actually look at the snaps. Don't just count them. That's not how you evaluate a player. You don't just count snaps. Come on, we know better. Anyways, so Darrisaw being out makes the left side worse. How they choose to mitigate that, I guess there are a few options. I don't love any of them. It's going to be worse, bar none. So with the left side being worse, I think what the Vikings have to do is they've got to back off on the long drops. And Sam Darnold, they have to now incorporate more quick game. It will make the offense a little more boring, but a little more boring, maybe a little more conservative, maybe 3rd and 6s instead of 3rd and 3s. That's better than sacks, right? And the offense has been, Sam Darnold holds the ball forever, right? And part of that is him being indecisive or taking a long time. But I feel like every time I actually sit down and watch, I go, okay, he's actually in a decent rhythm here. This is just a really long concept. There is a 7-step drop to it. There might be a play action fake to it. There is, every route is breaking off at 12 to 14 yards. And it takes forever for all of that to develop and happen. And so Darnold has to hold the ball that long, and the offensive line has to block for that long. This is why when we talk about like Ed Ingram and Dalton Risner, that I sort of wince a little bit at the idea of not being happy enough with the Vikings offensive line. The Vikings offensive line has been asked to move mountains, and the fact that they've survived at all is, I think, a testament to good play. And I certainly don't think anybody's done anything benchable. Maybe the Vikings disagree and they'll do something about that. We'll see what happens when Risner's back from his back injury. That didn't happen on Thursday yet. And now the situation may be different. But I don't think they can do that anymore without Darrisaw. And that sucks, because that's part of what has made Sam Darnold's start to the season so cool. Is that he's good at those plays. He's good at a long developing, find the post, wait for a defensive back to declare, throw against the coverage, and really stress those DBs, force them into, a rock and a hard place, cut them in half with dividing concepts and stuff. And Darnold's really good at executing that stuff. I don't know if he is as good at executing the quick game, but at the same time, if you're an NFL quarterback, you probably should be all right at throwing like stick. Like, you should be able to do that. That's like the most basic thing in football. And so if you can get him maybe doing a little bit of 3-step drop quick game, you can help him stay in a rhythm. And the other thing that I've sort of been advocating for this anyways, like the reason is, if Darnold gets into those panicky modes, where it feels like the game is kind of chasing him, and you can feel him start to play hero ball and start to force it a little more. And I thought last night he actually got away with those, no turnovers, beautiful stuff. But sometimes he doesn't, right? And you feel him start to really chase it and loses composure almost. Well, a great way to just sort of regain your footing is to just throw a couple slants real quick and get a 3rd and 2. Slant for 4, 3rd and 2. Just do that. It's so much harder to regain that when everything is supposed to be a 20-yard chunk. So it might force the Vikings to do something I've kind of wanted them to do anyways, but unfortunately, I like them doing that, really sparingly to get your quarterback's brain back under control. I don't like doing that because you're forced to, because you're not going to be able to protect the way you used to. So don't mistake me for thinking this is actually secretly going to make the Vikings better. It doesn't. They're worse now. They are worse now, and significantly so. It's just how it is. And now they've got 10 games left to play without Christian Darrisaw, and hopefully they can earn another game or two. And then finally, I just wanted to take a moment to appreciate that Christian Darrisaw is actually under contract. So I did not expect that deal to get done this offseason with the way it did. And boy, am I happy that it did, because if Darrisaw were going into a contract year, in that hypothetical world, this is now a Danielle Hunter situation, and there is like every chance in the world that Darrisaw just becomes a free agent and doesn't finish his career with Minnesota. That's so much harder for that to happen. Now it's still temporary, and I think there's a comfort in that. This is, I don't know, depending on how you define short term, but this is finite. This problem for the Vikings will end. And it's important for the Vikings to remember that, so they don't like panic and go trade a first-round pick for 8 games of a tackle. But I think it's also important for us to remember this problem will be over eventually. Darrisaw will return, even if it takes till week 4 of next year, because this was a way worse injury than we thought. Even if it's that, it will end eventually, and he will still be under contract. And by the time it's time to negotiate his next contract, this injury will be well in the rear view. There's no permanent impact unless you make it a permanent impact by panicking. I will see you all on Monday. Take care. Have a good weekend. And as always, Skull.